Greetings, everyone, and welcome to today's highly informative and insightful webinar on how to extend SAP GRC across your business applications and also, enable automated risk mitigation. Over the next hour or so, we'll, delve into the world of SAP GRC, learn, all about leveraging your solid foundation that you may already have in GRC, and then how you can extend it to your entire ecosystem of business applications. And then most importantly, how do you truly focus on the material financial risk rather than looking at the entire population that is out there? With that, my name is Sachin Singh. I'm a managing director at Deloitte, focused on cyber and ERP application security and controls. I am joined by two, very known personalities in the world of SAP GRC, who will do their introductions here in a second. Chris is going to share his perspectives on SAP GRC, and Susan is going to provide insights on the Pathlock solutions. And then lastly, I'll go into more of a case study as to how SAP, Pathlock, and Deloitte were able to realize this solution at actually one of our clients. So without further ado, Chris, over to you for introductions.
Hello, everyone, and thanks so much for joining the session today. I'm Chris Radkowski. I'm the Director of Solution Management at SAP, and I focus on the access governance portfolio. And that includes the topic that we're going to focus on today, which is around access control, which is near and dear to all our hearts. Sachin, did you want to go ahead and advance the slides, or Susan, did you want to go and do an intro?
I can do a real quick intro. So Susan Stapleton, I'm with, we are a partner of SAP and a partner of Deloitte, and we do work closely together as a way to triangulate and help customers achieve their governance, risk, and compliance initiatives. Yeah, I think that's it for now. I came from SAP. I've been at Pathlock for a long time, and my focus has always been working with SAP GRC customers and helping to provide further automation and anywhere we can.
All right. So as I was mentioning, we'll basically have three sections today. Chris is going to talk about all things good SAP GRC. Susan will share some perspectives on SAP solution extension solutions, primarily focused on GRC. And then lastly, I'll go into the case study. So with that, I'll hand it over to Chris to talk about SAP.
Thanks so much, Sachin. And so today we're going to focus mostly on SAP access control, and the slide here represents a combination of the product functionality, but as well as the different processes that our customers need to support to ensure that, one, users get the appropriate access they need in systems, and two, that they, that they're free of SOD issues or toxic assignments. As well as there's a number of other processes that we all have to support. I mean, we're dealing with systems where the roles or entitlements are often cryptic. SAP does not make that very easy for us. The transactions are in codes, XK01, SU01, and so forth. And these represent different risks to an organization. And if you look at what access control does compared to more of an IT sort of user administration tool, it's really connecting the roles and the risks that are associated with roles to the business. And so, these have kind of grown up and evolved over time to ensure that complex business applications can be appropriately managed. So if we kind of walk around this slide here, you've got monitor privileges, which is really a case of handling exceptional cases where you need to grant someone elevated access, to go in and manage vendors or do something which is unusual for that user. So you've got to have a process in place to do that. Of course, the solution supports that. There are lots of compliance requirements around periodically going back in and certifying that users have the right level of access. And so, there's a process that's built into the tool that allows you to pull existing assignments, send those, via a review page to a manager, for them to go through and, ensure that the users have the right level of access. If they don't, there's a mechanism by which that access can be updated. Maintaining roles is really about ensuring that, or creating a structure that allows you to administer your applications more easily. Maybe you want to group those roles by business function, or you want to associate those with a particular job position, or organization or something. So solution allows you to do just that. User provisioning also is the mechanics of ensuring that the right approvals are in place and users are being assigned the right roles or entitlements in systems, and that's closely associated with the ability to ensure that you're not introducing any kind of new toxic assignment or SOD. So when you look at this, it's both the functions that are in the solution, but as well as the processes that you need to support. If you look across the board, I mean, this is a solution that's been around for quite a long time. It's very mature. It's been implemented in thousands and thousands of customer environments. Large, extremely large, customers have been implementing this in a huge scale. So I was going to say that at one of our conferences this year, I'd never heard as much love for this particular solution. I don't know what's going on, but we've had a lot of very positive feedback lately about the product. I think one comment I heard is that this made my life easier for the last decade. Well, it's going to be around for a while. For those of you that are paying attention or have seen the updates, where we are planning a release in 2026. So the end of life is going to be past 2030 now. So I think with that, Sachin, we can go on to the next slide. So one of the things that the solution does very well is it helps you identify potential toxic assignments or critical access or segregation of duties, which represent different levels of risk for an organization. So you do have some capabilities to assign those, at high, medium, low, but there's really no way to help you prioritize the efforts around determining how to quantify that particular risk for the organization. So there's a couple different processes that you need to implement that Pathlock has done an amazing job of actually bringing in the dollar value associated with the particular transactions that you might need to review. So it's all about taking a huge number of potential SOD violations and boiling those down into exactly the risks that you might need to take extra effort or apply mitigating control or make an assignment change to address. So associated with that is a near and dear to our hearts is a mechanism to define controls in your system, which in this case, in the cases that we're talking about with our applications, these things can have they can have a material difference to our organization, because these particular types of assignments are having to do with maybe financial transactions or receiving goods or other kinds of things that do represent actual dollars and cents to our organization. It's very different from what you'd think of in terms of an IT or administration tool. These controls are intended to ensure that our financial processes and what we're eventually reporting are as accurate as possible. And the combination of access control and Pathlock help you basically look through all of the different potential SOD violations and focus on the ones that really make the most difference, ones that could represent a particular financial risk to your organization. So this is one great combination of Pathlock and access control that help you go through the process of identifying potential SOD violations, associating those with financial impact, and finally addressing the different kinds of controls and mechanisms for ensuring that those are managed, reported, and resolved. So with that, Sachin, I think we can go on. Turn over to you, Susan.
All right, I'm going to jump in here. Thank you, Chris. So, Chris talked about that there are thousands of access control customers. Those access control customers have invested heavily in their processes. And as both Sachin and Chris said, it does lay the foundation and give you a pretty comprehensive solution to manage user risks. But companies are adopting a lot of other solutions into their environment, either because they're moving some critical processes to cloud, or a lot of our companies are acquiring other companies. Those other companies could be, running Oracle, Dynamics, or other applications. And one of the things that I've started hearing more and more is that companies are looking for ways to decrease their technical debt. And one way is to have a comprehensive GRC solution that can manage all of those applications. So access control can be the GRC solutions moving forward. We can bring in other applications that are in your SOC scope, whether you're moving your procurement to a cloud solution like Coupa, Smart, or Ariba. A lot of SAP customers use Salesforce. You're going to have an HR application like SuccessFactors or Workday. All of those still need to be in your compliance scope because the activities you're doing in those systems are SOX relevant, financially relevant. So you can have one source of truth for all of your stakeholders, no matter what applications you have. And the goal is to streamline and provide a really effective compliance and control solution for user access. Typically, access control is fully deployed at customer sites. They've been using it for 10 or 15 years. They have their risks identified. They have their workflow set up. They have their role owners that know how to come in here and approve roles. And it is relied on by your audit teams, both internal and external, to give complete audit trails. That can be, changes to your rules, provisioning access to users, user access reviews, setting up job roles now that cross multiple applications. A user can get a job role that gives them access to not only SAP, but to procurement cloud solutions, to HR solutions, employee self-service roles. You can create job roles and compliant job roles that cross multiple applications. And all of that is carried out within access control when we normalize security authorization concepts from multiple applications and bring it all back into access control. Another gap that customers are having now is providing effective controls when you have risks that are known, not only within SAP, but now across system as well. So there's a long history of how to manage your risks. A lot of companies just accept the risk. They just say, hey, people have to do this and we're just going to move along. And that is not a control, and it is no longer being accepted as a control by anyone. Another method is to assign process controls. So, companies will say, I have a process control for vendor management, I have a process control for vendor payments, and they just assign that and move along. But the users who have SOD risks within an organization are typically your super users, and they have a lot of access to systems because they know how to do things in the systems. They know how to process payments. They know how to go in and create a vendor from scratch. And just assigning a couple of process controls to an SOD really does not manage a user risk. They can easily change a vendor or create a vendor from scratch that is not going to raise a flag on any vendor process control. They can also create payments and a process control that's set up to look for thresholds or attributes of a vendor payment. Customers or employees know how to create something that would not raise any flags within that process control. So the only way really to effectively monitor SODs is to monitor both sides of the risk and correlate that activity back to the user. Ineffective controls are being called out by audit more so now than I've ever seen it. And auditors see that critical business processes or activities are moving outside of SAP. And the mitigations, if they have some in place, typically it's just for SAP. So the mitigation needs to be extended out as well. All right, next slide, Sachin. Back to that first gap, the comprehensive scope of your SOD risk analysis. It needs to be granular when you bring in these other applications. It needs to be apples to apples. Access control was developed from the get-go to go very deep into authorizations and to provide a fine-grained risk analysis report. And we tweaked it over the years to make sure you never get false reports from access control. You got to interrogate your authorizations from these other systems at that same level, because if you cannot produce an accurate SOD report, it loses all value. There's no business or stakeholder that wants to look at reports that are not accurate and that they can't rely on. So it's very important to go under the role level to look at these applications, and for me to know that if a user can maintain a purchase order in SAP and receive goods into Manhattan warehouse, that I'm going deep enough to say they can absolutely do this, and it is an SOD risk that needs to be mitigated. All right, Sachin, next. So the next thing would be, identifying or making sure you have that preventive check in place. That is where access control comes in, and that potential risk or people who can do activities, that is reported now and can be reported now in access control across multiple applications. So my purchase orders could be in one app, my invoicing can be in another app, or typically ERP, and my inventory management could be yet in a third app. So you can monitor all of that. You need to monitor all of that. You need to make sure users do not have excessive access or toxic access unless they absolutely need it. But once they have that access, can you click, yeah, one more time. Once they have that access, it's your responsibility to put a control in place, and a good control, an effective control. And that's where we pick up and start automating that piece of it. So you might have 200 or 300 users who can do something. We can go through, look at all of the transactional activity that has been posted in your business apps and tie all of that back to a user. So this is where we talk about getting down to the detail that the business reviewer needs to look at to effectively manage this risk. And not only can we do that, but because these are posted transactions, there is a purchase order that's been posted, there's a payment that's been posted, there's inventory that's been scrapped, there's a vendor that's been created from scratch, and we want to look at that as well. Those things are, 2 or more transactions correlated to the user, identify material SOD violations that have occurred, and then we can assign a quantity associated with that, because a payment has a value, material scrapped has a value, and that's how we can quantify the risk to give you a complete picture of access governance, from identifying the risk, cleaning up everything you can. Once you have to accept the risk, we'll monitor it, and that gives you a very comprehensive end-to-end, kind of an audit-proof solution as well. This data is all online, so people can't go in and delete transactions, remove things. This is deemed an effective control by external auditors. One more slide for me, I think. So, and you can go ahead and build this out if you want to, Sachin. So CCM's the buzzword, right? CCM is something that all companies seem to be striving towards, because there's just not enough resources internally to help manage this very manual process. So I consider this continuous control monitoring for user risks, looking at 100% of the transactions, looking at all of the business systems, and looking at the user across all of those to identify if they've done something that needs to be reviewed and signed off on. And this essentially now is your mitigation control. It's fine-grained. We can remove anything that's considered something like noise, like I changed something very inconsequential on a vendor record. We can ignore that. We can ignore transactions that are under a certain dollar value. And I think the key piece here is that we set up these controls one time, we test them, we validate them, and then we run them on a monthly or quarterly basis, whatever the customer requires. Sometimes some of our customers run these weekly, but you're really taking a lot of intensive resource activities out of this process. And you don't have to manipulate the data on the back end either. So a lot of people talk about, well, I bring a bunch of data from other systems, I put it in spreadsheets, then I have to figure out who owns the risk and try to get lists sent out to different individuals for them to review and sign off on that. It's all offline. Nothing can be easily audited by your external or internal auditors. So, this automated CCM for user risks removes a lot of that data manipulation that's required to get the right data to the right people for them to sign off on. It also is important that we provide it in a format that the business can understand, because everybody knows T codes and things like that are pretty technical. But when you're going out to a business owner and showing them, here's the invoice number that was created for this vendor on this date, it was this dollar value, and the user also created that vendor from scratch, maybe a one-time payment to a vendor that they set up, the day before. That can easily be surfaced as an exception, reviewed, and signed off on. All right, so I guess, I'm just going to wrap up here and say the combination of SAP Access Control with CCM from Access Violation Management will give you an end-to-end automated access governance solution from identification all the way through to mitigation. And that mitigation piece is key. It's very complex, it's resource intensive, it's very difficult to do, especially if some of these transactions get into the hundreds of thousands per quarter, and they do for SAP customers. So it's a lot to get through. Unless you do sampling, and sampling, you can miss a lot from a sampling perspective. All right, Sachin, let me turn it over to you. And Sachin's going to talk about a customer that had a strategy going into their S4 automation or S4 project to try to automate as much as possible. And I think, you know, this is what we're starting to see from many companies, is that as they're transforming their business through S4, they also have to transform their control process to keep up.
All right, thank you, Susan. So now that we've seen how SAP GRC and Padlock solutions can be leveraged to take your GRC capabilities to the next level, let's really take a look at example of where we really made it happen at one of our customers recently. So this company we're discussing today is a leading consumer products organization based in the US, operating in the food sector. They roughly have around 10,000 odd employees located all over the US. And typical to any organization that's growing up, they've had many acquisitions, things like that. So you would kind of notice these smaller companies that are operating within a larger umbrella, so to speak. Now, obviously being a public organization, they had to comply with the financial reporting regulations, SOX requirements and things like that. Now, before they started the transformation journey, they were already operating on ECC for many years. So when they started looking at a business transformation program, primarily enabled by S4HANA, they also went in with the mindset of, we need, best-in-class solutions, which kind of automatically meant that you will land up with a complex ecosystem of business applications. So even though, primary S4HANA was the major driver, there were, additional cloud solutions like, Ariba, Anaplan, OpenText, business technology platform, integrated business planning, SAP Analytic Cloud. So it was like a complex ecosystem of many different applications that was part of the transformation. Now, as I was mentioning, right, they were already operating on ECC. So when they were going into the transformation, they had a very clear vision of using, access control and process control, having seen that, over the years. But when they were running ECC, and like most of the organizations, there were several SOD violations in their system, and most of them were being relied upon for mitigating controls through their process controls, either automated, manual in nature. Now, time and again, what they would notice is the deficiencies in performance of these mitigating controls. So now you have an environment where you have people that have conflicting access, but then you are relying on these mitigating controls to be performed the right way. But these are manual controls. Somebody has to go and look at changes to be done and verify them on a quarterly basis. So several times they would have challenges where it was not done the right way, the documentation was missing, or somebody completely forgot to do it. And because of that, their auditors would ask for a look back analysis to confirm if somebody actually did any activity in the system and the financial impact of it. So because of the problem that Susan sort of already indicated, like most of the reality is most of the organizations are going to have SOD conflicts in the environment, and we all rely on the performance of these mitigating controls as compensating to manage the risk that is being violated. So how and traditionally what we've seen is these mitigating controls are usually one-sided in nature. So if we're talking about vendor and payments to a vendor, the mitigating control is likely going to be, a person or a manager is looking at changes to a vendor on a quarterly basis and certifying the changes are good. But that doesn't mean that you are actually looking at somebody doing conflicting activity. That's more of validating whether the master data changes are right. So a true mitigating control isn't really being applied on SODs. There's very few instances where that happens. And if you are already doing it, that means you are already kind of doing a did-do sort of analysis in your system. So going back to the case study, between SAP, Padlock, Deloitte, we were able to evaluate the solution, AVM solution holistically because it checked the boxes. If you remember, they have complex ecosystem of applications. So the desire was to have centralized GRC to manage all cloud, non-cloud. So Padlock was able to make that happen with the SAP GRC solution. And then the second was to not have the same situation where they were having to do, the look back analysis, in which case, Pathlog was able to extend GRC capabilities and enable that financial transaction monitoring, the did-do aspect of it. So all the boxes were checked, which is why the solution sort of natively made sense. Now, if we go to the requirements, which I was just briefly touching upon, but I'm going to drill down into what are the really the key requirements coming out of when the client was going into this transformation effort. So if you think about the slide that Susan was representing, you have the left side where you have the can do aspect, and then the right side you have the did do aspect. So the client is here wanting to do both. They want to do can do across their portfolio of business applications. So be it ERP, non-ERP, SAP, non-SAP. And because they have already been running GRC for a while, typical functionalities like user access management, SOD analysis, continuous controls monitoring, those are already existing in their GRC platform. So as they go about implementing S4 solution or the other 5 or 6 different solutions that we were referring to, you want to extend that and make it a more centralized GRC platform. So that was the first requirement. The second was also enabling the financial exposure and the access violations that did do side of it. So in order to make this happen, we basically had to enable both the functionalities in AVM. First was the risk assessment edition, which is more to do with the do aspect, which will enable the financial transaction monitoring. And then the other one was the system integration, which was the left side in Susan's slide, if you remember. And that's where you would extend your access and process control capabilities. So for access control, we were able to extend AC to Ariba, Analytic Cloud, BDP, IBP, to manage SOD analysis, privilege access, user access. And then from a process control standpoint, we were able to extend the CCM rules that were there in process control to either the 2 systems that you see there, which is Ariba and process orchestration. So if you traditionally have seen like extending, Pathlog is primarily just extending SOD. That's not the case. You can actually extend both access control capabilities as well as process control to your entire suite of business applications. And that's what we ended up doing there. Now, if I walk you through the sort of like the implementation, we ended up connecting all the business applications that were part of the transformation to more of a centralized GRC platform, which was comprising of obviously process control, access control, and because of this tighter integration with the GRC with the AVM Pathlog solution, it almost is a seamless unified GRC platform that you are now looking at. So all of your can do, did do, all of that is happening centrally in a place where all the stakeholders that you would typically interact with from a compliance, control owner, auditors, and security standpoint, they can interact with the same centralized instance. So for example, in the past, the company had to run that look back analysis and go to the system, query the tables, join all that, create these massive Excel files and give that to the auditor, and then they would do their analysis. Now all that is already happening in AVM. So the auditor would directly go there, look at the exceptions, how it was triaged or processed, and use that for the performance of the control or the testing of the control. So it made, if you think about this from a effectiveness and benefit standpoint, you are not only reducing effort for business, which is all the control owners that were having to review your vendor master and your POs and your invoices on a quarterly basis. Instead of looking at hundreds and thousands of line items, now they just get an email saying, hey, somebody actually created a vendor in the last 6 months and actually paid them out last month. And here is an exception that was assigned to you. So now you are, just very focused on actual activity that has happened in the system versus, looking at a giant Excel file with all the changes that have been done by somebody. So potential versus actual, it changes. It's a game changer for business because now you don't have to spend these hours and hours. You can focus on your core business activities. On top of that, if you think about management audit and your external audit, everybody was spending time to test these controls in a manual manner, validate your testing or your manual performance. Now you can rely on the automated platform to make that happen. So the total cost, if you think about it, there's a reduction in business performance of these controls. So the effort reduction there. You have testing, both internal as well as external audit, that reduces. And on top of all that, now you are getting a centralized platform, GRC platform, which is covering both SAP, ERP, non-SAP systems in a single UI, and makes the customer experience efficiency much higher than what you had previously. You are also not throwing away your investment. So because the client was already using access control and process control, they were able to continue using that. But by using AVM as a sidecar to that solution, they were able to actually maximize their investment on AC and PC already and extend that over to the other applications. So it was, all in all, a better outcome for the client itself, who had invested so much money on access and process control. Now, if you also look at the ability to seamlessly achieve identification of user access, because now you have all these applications where your business process is sort of scattered. Now you're getting a centralized view of it. So it's not just limited to your view into one SAP ERP primary application, so to speak. And then lastly, with this entire ecosystem, you're getting an enterprise-wide GRC program. So the capability that Pathlog is giving you, tomorrow, if you have another application, let's just say you have Salesforce, then you can plug that in. If you have Workday, you can plug that in and just continue to expand. The rules and everything is already defined. So all that is needed is to tweak how that translation normalization would happen for the new application. But by and large, all your infrastructure is already there, so to speak. So that was the big benefit for the client there that ended up going with this platform. Now, to quickly kind of cover some of these sort of like broader benefits, we did talk about effort and things like that. But if you look at the granular benefits, the day-to-day benefits of it, it's truly your coverage or the scope of controls that is getting expanded. So now in traditional world, if you run GRC access control right now, you would be scanning all your users and their entitlements, and it tells you here are thousands of violations that exist, and now you have to triage those violations to remediate in some fashion. Either you take out access or you give them mitigating controls, but you are going through the entire population. I know it can be millions in certain cases. So, but what you're getting out of a Pathlog GRC combined solution is narrowed down and very focused attention on things that are financially relevant. So instead of looking at the entire, kind of like as you see on the slide, needle in a haystack, you're getting more from, a very precise view of how you should be focusing your control efforts on. So I'll give you a real life example that we saw, which is in a typical journal entry type of control, where you have to do a QA or review of journal entries, manual journal entries on a monthly basis. That usually has like millions of line items at a fairly large organization. But if you are able to narrow down the changes or the quantification of the risk to things that are really relevant for you. So, dollar thresholds or certain fields that are important to you, or certain approval criteria that are important to you, who is creating, where it's coming from, certain accounts that are important for you. If you tailor your approach to that and use this solution, then now you are just looking at a very precise data set to test your control rather than the entire population, which we all know. I mean, if you're looking at millions of line items, there's only so much effectiveness that is going to come out of it. At some point, that's bound to fail. So that's basically the big benefit that comes out of it. So we did talk about effectiveness, being efficient, being consistent, but that's just a broader benefit. Realistically, when you get down to the nitty-gritties of it, like the day-to-day job of people is getting better and enhanced, because now you don't you don't expect them to do this triaging of thousands of line items across their job. Like even security administrators, when they have to interact with GRC and download these thousands of SOD reports, I mean, it's time consuming. Now you can apply the same lens to reviewing user access. So in traditional sense, you would have reviewed user access where you look at a massive file of users in your department and roles that they have in SAP, and if you go further down, maybe you are looking at even permissions that are associated with the roles. But like this is a massive undertaking. Some organizations spend thousands and thousands of hours every quarter just trying to do that. But if you flip the coin here with the capability that you now have, which is instead of looking at the entitlements, you are actually looking at what are people doing in the system. And based on my risk threshold, my risk criteria, here is what I'm seeing. I am seeing millions and millions of purchase orders being approved in a certain department, and that is my focus area rather than looking at the entitlements that are with people, which is more of like a probability that they will do something in future. So the outlook changes there significantly. So if you think about like we were talking about how the solution is giving you mitigating controls for your SODs. You can actually take it further to improve your other processes also, like user access. We've had instances where we've used this output to see process variations also. So it's not just SODs and UAR or controls, like you get to see if people are bypassing any processes, because those get trapped as exceptions in the process. So for example, if you have a centralized process of managing vendors and your rule looks at the vendors that are being created outside of the group, you automatically get visibility if that somebody is bifurcating or bypassing the process. Could be because the access was given the wrong manner, or maybe there is an exception business process that was established which wasn't communicated to headquarters, for example. These are very common things that happen. So these are all like the side benefits, which are very powerful in nature when you start utilizing this sort of analytic for your business case. And then lastly, what we did see, this is very tangible impact, was it required everybody to have a better understanding of the process. So the enhanced collaboration between business, IT, and audit was actually a lot better in comparison to what it was in the past. Because you needed to know the process. All the parties needed to understand the process, which actually helped improve the overall environment at the organization, so to speak. So with that, I think we've covered most of the topics. Stephanie, I want to hand it over to you to see if we have any questions to be covered.
Yeah, thank you, Sachin and Susan and Chris for your presentation. Again, if you do have any questions, please add them now into the questions box and we would be happy to answer any of those. Our first question is, if I have an IDM, can't I use it for my periodic user reviews and SOD reporting?
I can take that. So I think the goal is, if you're using something for user access reviews, but you could also do it in access control, you pick the one that's best for you. So if you already have it set up in an identity management solution, continue using that, because that's typically just a role review. If you need more information on your user access reviews, like usage, especially usage for things like activities in Ariba or other applications, you might want to transfer that UR for SOC systems to access control. It can be done in either, so just pick what's best for you, I would say.
Yeah, as well. I mean, you want to be able to look at SOD information in that review process, and essentially you want to leverage that to clean up, role assignments that may not be necessary at the same time. So, as long as you're getting the granularity you need out of the IDM system, then I'd say you're good to go. IDM systems typically are more focused on administration as opposed to governance, so just bear that in mind.
Okay, perfect. Our next question is, how can you manage cross-system reporting when users have access to multiple systems, but their IDs are different in some of them?
Chris, you want to take that one?
Yeah, certainly. Hopefully, your system will have a way of mapping those together. You have some kind of common attribute where you can map different identities across different systems. I mean, that's the function of the application. So make sure that's configured properly, and you should be able to get consolidated cross-system reporting.
Yeah, I would say since the beginning of time, even when access control was just monitoring access across maybe even multiple SAP systems, sometimes user IDs were different. So a standard functionality in access control is to be able to combine that mapping to know that I'm S. Stapleton in one system, I4912 in another system, and S. Stapleton at pathlock.com in my cloud system. So all of that is just standard functionality within access control.
Perfect. And Sachin, I think you're not sharing your screen anymore. And our next question is, can you kindly throw some light on the licensing aspect? Do customers need to buy separate license for Pathlock, or does it come under offering of SAP GRC suite?
Susan, you want to take that?
I'll take a first stab at that. So these are on SAP's price list. These are SAP products, the Pathlock solutions that we went over here today. They are sold, supported by SAP. The license metrics, if you want to integrate to systems, it's just number of productive instances that you want to integrate. Ariba would be one, Salesforce would be one, Workday would be one. You would need 3 integration licenses. The other automated mitigation, it is a user-based metric. So the number of employees you have or the number of users you have monitored by access control are the same number of users you monitor or license for monitoring by ABM risk assessment, which is the automated mitigation.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, the ABM tool also, it is an extra purchase. It doesn't come with access control, for example.
Yeah, it's extra. Good point.
Yeah.
All right, perfect. And our last question is that I'm seeing right now is, how do you come up with values to quantify risks?
I'll take the first stab at that, but basically every SOD violation, we might pick a different field to report on value. If it's maintained vendor and process of payment, it's the amount of the payment that is the quantification number. If it's received goods and scrap material, it's the amount or dollar value of the material that was scrapped. So it is actual values taken from posted transactions, SOD by SOD by SOD, and correlated, so we know which value is the appropriate value to report and quantify each of these risks. And that's how we use it. And for global companies, we also normalize the reporting back to the currency that you want, and we typically pull your currency map from SAP. So whether it's pound sterling, euro, peso, or US dollars, when we quantify the risk, we will roll it all up into a standard currency that you want to report on, or at the level you want to report on.
And if I may add one thing, sorry, Chris, one thing that we learned practical from doing this is when you have this financial quantification view of risks in mind, and you're planning to go down this journey of can do versus did do, your existing rule set, when you start applying that lens to it, it'll tell you that some of the risks don't even make sense because there is no financial impact associated with the risk. So as we went about doing this at many places, that's what we saw. Like there are clients that are running risk analysis for risks that won't even happen in the system when you start putting this financial lens to the risk, so to speak.
I'll tell you, I mean, just to give you an example of, some people have a lot of risks defined in access control that will never happen or does not ever have a material value or risk to your organization. Something as simple as people want to segregate master data duties. So they will put a rule in to say, if you can create customers, you shouldn't be able to create vendors. Well, there will never be a financial impact of that to you as an organization. It's just something that the company wants to segregate. And it doesn't even really make sense unless it's more of an operational, I just don't want this group to do both of those things. But that's an example like what Sachin was talking about.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's also a good way to talk about how the solution is differentiated a little bit. In one sense, out of any transaction where there's a dollar value that related to the throughput of the transactions that are occurring, that is a representative of what the actual risk is. Now other types of systems or other types of whatever security systems, there's a lot of sort of fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Well, if there's a breach or data loss, it may be hard to cross correlate that with an actual dollar number. You can only kind of use averages, the average cost of a breach or the average cost of some kind of data loss incident. But we were talking about controls and SODs. You can correlate it to actual transaction throughput, so you get a good sense of it. Now a lot of more IT related systems will just say, well, we don't want marketing users to have access to whatever finance systems or whatever goods inventory systems or something. That's also critical, like Susan touched on. And there may not necessarily be a dollar value, but definitely internal policies where you want to only grant people access to things that they need. So for security and other reasons. So that's an important consideration when you're developing your rule set.
Okay, perfect. I think that's all the questions we have for today. So I just wanted to thank everyone for coming and thank our speakers. And if you have any more questions, you're welcome to reach out to us at info@pathlock.com and we can direct that to the appropriate person. And with that, I'll just say thank you for coming and we hope to see you next time.